The project's been going for 2 years, and it's been looking at really two things in lighting. One is sustainability and one is health and well-being. But one of the problems with both of those topics is they're being challenged on very technical levels at the moment, and I'm trying to make an argument against that. So the project set out to challenge the increasing levels of light in the workplace and really try to challenge this mechanical interpretation of productivity and tasks that are carried out in the working day. So the approach that I made was very different. I noticed that in the English language there's a wide range of words that borrow from light or that have an etymological connection to light. And they're used to talk about a broader range of subjects, not just simply about light itself. And I tried to encourage the participants in the research to talk a lot more freely about light. And one challenge was borrowed from the Radio 4 program, Just a Minute. I asked them to talk about how they felt about the light in their workplace for 1 minute without hesitation, repetition, or deviation. So the words for light are not purely literal, but they have a meaning attached. And there's a strong association of those words to do with light having a positive meaning, while those to do with dark have very negative connotations. And I thought of it, if I could possibly destabilize this dichotomy between light and dark and good and evil, that it might also be possible to challenge the quantitative approach to lighting design and talk more about the qualities. So I asked all the participants in the study to try and subjectively map their interpretations of the word's meanings. And indeed, there was a consistency between what was felt to be a negative word in darkness and what was positive in light words. And further, it could almost, if each word was given a weighting, it could be placed along a scale where the most positive words are at the top, and they're also the brightest words, and the darkest words are the most negative at the bottom. But there are problems with certain words like glare, blinding, and dazzling. They're out of place in this arrangement. And if they follow the rule, they should occupy a position with the highest value words. So I thought perhaps the words could be remapped along two axes, one axis for the perceived brightness of a word and the other for its subjective value. And the words could be accommodated in this arrangement. And this diagram could perhaps even challenge the idea that brighter is always better. You can see that there's a kind of optimum level of brightness before the words actually drop off and have a very negative meaning. And indeed, you don't want glare in your workplace. It was this methodology that really led to the outcome of the project taking the form of a publication. And it used essays to investigate certain conflicts and contradictions in lighting. So it's really not a set of guidelines. It's really meant to be a kind of text that challenges that whole approach. The first chapter, Light Volumes, Dark Matters, explores the spatial phenomena of light and the perceptual experiences of extreme light conditions and darkness. I also made other visits to light installations where visual perception is manipulated. Here is an image of Carlos Cruz Diez's chromosaturations in Parma. In a sequence of rooms, each is saturated with a single color of light. What is really extraordinary is that it is the space that seems colored rather than the surface of the walls. And it really questions our idea of how we think we see, because we tend to assume that we see what is on the surface. In the first chapter, I also investigate the qualities of darkness and how vision operates in a very different way than in bright light, as the information that we see is reduced and often comes to us in pieces that we have to construct to make sense of what is being seen. And I wanted to argue for dark space to be more welcomed into lighting design. As the lighting designer Edward Bartholomew has written, he senses what is being lit as not the space, but the fear of the consequences of darkness. So in this chapter, I tried to interrogate what is natural and artificial in lighting and tried to make the point that the way that we now work is highly artificial, and the way that we live in cities is also very artificial. And what might work very well out of doors may have less than positive implications for those who sit at the desk all day. So I really asked how much nature can be brought inside. The book concludes with a suggested methodology for the inclusion of a broader range of user needs in the lighting strategy. And through the analogies of evolution and legacy, the problems faced by sustainability and retrofitting and the speed of technological progress are explored. And it really encourages architects to question their approach to light, and in particular not to automatically resort to science and technology and try to fix the lighting problem.
Okay, so that was Claudia Dutson speaking at the Royal College of Art in September. So as we head into the final 10 minutes of our webinar, questions are flowing in from all over the place. The first is one for Jonathan Spears from Navina, a lighting designer from Oslo, She says, Mr. Spears, how are people responding to your project, the Grand Canal Dublin, with red and green light in a public space?
They're smiling. The space there, I think, is working very well. Asking my opinion is probably the wrong person to ask. You should ask the public in Dublin. But the response so far has been fantastic. The system there responds to people's movements. So as people move past the pickup sticks, which has the red light in them, they actually change and have a dynamic sequence. So there is a response. There's a piece of give and take in terms of that. But the red and the green was really to do with a directionality. There's a red carpet and a green carpet, which was evolved by Martha Schwartz, the landscape architect, and we just delightfully went with the flow to create something that hopefully would make people smile.
Another question we've heard from earlier, that an architect called Terence, and he asked a question about tungsten lighting in the home, because obviously the original incandescent bulb is currently being phased out due to European legislation. And Terence asks, are we losing the characteristics of the golden glow of nighttime lighting? So is the night going to disappear, or will we be able to regain control of the color of domestic light? I think inferred in this is the idea that the kind of replacement, the low energy replacement for the orange burning incandescent is somehow less alluring. I don't know what you might make of that, Fred.
Well, yes, this is Fred again. Yeah, I think it's a technological question. I think people have got used to perhaps inferior replacements of incandescent in the past. The fact is, there are perfectly good warm colour, low energy alternatives to the incandescent. So I think you can light the space with a golden glow if you want to. One thing I have noted recently is that people got used to dimming of incandescent and making it even more yellow. And one of the things I can't answer is, when you dim low energy products generally, they don't change colour. But we've got used to it. And I think that's something that I don't know what the answer to is, but there is an issue there. People perhaps want a warmer colour sometimes, a candle-lit effect.
Well, I think domestic lighting is all about warmth and atmosphere and ambience, and I feel that some of the, I know the technology is being refined all the time, but I've been very disappointed with the colour temperature of some low energy
yes, you've got
light sources.
There's a lot of products out there replacing the incandescent, and some of them aren't so good. So it's one of those problems. I mean, as a manufacturer, we spend a lot of time making sure we have the quality and the colour consistency and so on. But of course, there's a lot of other products out there.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan,
I think the public have got to demand better quality lamps. If the governments of our world are mandating and dictating that we have to stop utilizing certain types of things and replace them with something else, we have to be able to turn around and say, I'm sorry, that's all good and well, and we understand why you might want us to do that, but you've got to give us proper replacements, not something that is a poor quality substitute. And I think if we're more voluble, if the members of the public are more voluble about this, then I think it'll push the lamp manufacturers harder to come up with better quality results. I agree with Fred, there are some good quality units out there, but it's very hard for a member of the public going into a Home Depot or a B&Q or DIY store to know which ones are the better ones and which ones are not. And because everybody's pursuing this whole aspect of economy and everything else, they'll buy the cheapest one they can get, assuming that it's the same when you bought a cheaper incandescent lamp. Really, there wasn't much difference. It might last less time, but the quality of light would be the same. That is not the case with replacement compact fluorescence and things like that.
That's right, that's right.
I think there is some nostalgia around the phasing out of the old incandescent bulb. We ran a project here at the Royal College of Art in our design products department, in which we had 70 students do a short 3-week project all around the mourning the loss of the incandescent bulb. And and what it did was provide a platform for young designers to think about lighting in a range of lateral ways, and I think that was very good. So if nothing else, a bit of European legislation has raised the game in thinking about light sources.
Yeah.
I think we've got time for one more question. It comes from Florence, who's an architect, and she says that the light volumes dark matters research focused on interiors. Are there similar issues with exterior lighting? I mean, from my point of view, we are doing a new lighting research project with Megaman Charity Trust Foundation, and what we're looking at is exterior lighting, because the same issues crop up. The project is called Cities in the Shade, and it looks at the contradictions between cities trying to promote and brand themselves and have very strong identities, both nationally and internationally, with very, very prominent lighting of public monuments and bridges and pieces of infrastructure. So a sense of kind of strong urban identity against the need for the low-carbon city, the sustainable city. And there's a contradiction here. There's how do we get cities that look fantastic at night and project a strong sense, especially around issues like regeneration, but how do we do that in a responsible and sustainable way without people complaining about light pollution? So I think that's a very big issue that we're looking into over the next 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a city, Guangzhou in China. They had a policy. The government policy was these last 2 years leading to the Asian Games to light all the bigger buildings above a certain height to make the city look better. But then the amount of energy that took, of course, is quite considerable. But it was all about making the city look a showpiece for the games. And as you say, how do you balance that need against the need for sustainability?
I think it's down to it is a tough one. I think it's down to having an intelligent plan for what your city is about. And a little presentation where I mentioned Durham, I think, is a good example, where they want to create an urban pride, a civic pride in their city, but they want to do it in an intelligent way. And unlike some cities that have had lighting strategies done, there's a well-known city in the south of France where I kind of get the feeling that if you stood still for 5 or 10 minutes longer than normal, a guy would jump out of a van and bolt a light fixture to your forehead because they would think you were a light fixture. It would be, yes. There's a situation where there's some wonderful buildings beautifully illuminated in that city, but there's some horrible buildings atrociously illuminated in that city. And that should not be allowed to happen.
So, well, on that note of things not being allowed to happen and things being allowed to happen, I'd just like to thank everybody for tuning in today to this webinar, coming online. I'd like to thank our 2 panelists, Jonathan Spears, lighting designer and partner in Spears & Major, and Fred Bass, director of Neon Light International, which is the brand owner of Megaman. I hope you enjoyed this webinar and enjoyed exploring the issues around lighting and moving forward to a more flexible, responsive and imaginative approach to lighting as we go forward. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll just leave you with a quote from Claudia's book. Instead of trying to get the answer right, architects and designers could come up with the right questions. So let's keep asking the right questions in lighting design. Thank you.